Hi everyone. Today we're going to be looking at Captain Dan's follow-on book from his previous volume, the Boeing 737, the world's jet airliner. His follow-on book is a convenient prequel-sequel which is titled the Boeing 727 Triumph in the Skies. Now the question is, does this big beautiful book reach the same stratospheric heights as its previous volume? And the answer is not quite. While many of the same ingredients that made the Boeing 737 volume a fantastic work are included in this follow-on volume, it is also lacking in many others. So, while the side profiles of Jennings-Hellig are included in this book, there are nowhere near as many, and those that are included are primarily of US carriers and Boeing test aircraft, with only a handful of international carriers represented. My Delta liveried Ansett Boeing 727-200 here is not among them, unfortunately. And a fun fact about this particular plane: after its service with Ansett, it went on to becoming a freighter with FedEx, and when it was scrapped in 2008, the nose section was taken, stored, and is now preserved for display at the Museum of Flying in Santa Monica. It is in the FedEx livery, and while it was flying with that airline, it was also known as the Brittany. So, a little bit of history is still intact for us. But back to the book. So, setting aside the side profiles, this book is profusely illustrated. Unfortunately, the photos are not produced to the same quality as the previous volume, and let me find an example. So, these photos do represent many of the aircraft that were used by international carriers, but as you can see, the reproduction is not that good. They are either faded or lacking in contrast. Also, in addition to two Royal jets, as well as the aircraft that became known briefly as the Peanut 1, the Boeing 727's extensive use as an executive and private jet is barely mentioned. And while it does talk about the Boeing 727's use for scientific research, and particularly for understanding stalls and the development of collision avoidance, brought on in part by the tragic crash of PSA Flight 182, the spectacular controlled impact demonstration that was filmed in 2012 for the Discovery Channel is not mentioned. Now, I've been throwing way too much turbulence at this book and looking at all the elements that it does not have. But let's take a step back and look at the many features that it does have. As expected, this book does look back and detail the state of air travel in the 1960s, particularly the problems facing airlines with their short to medium haul routes. And the book also looks at the development of equivalent trijet aircraft. So planes such as Hawker Siddeley's Trident, the Yakolev 40 and 42, as well as the ubiquitous Tupolev 154, are all discussed in detail. The creation of the Boeing 727 and its variants form the core of this book, and in amongst the details, we also get many entertaining accounts and reminiscences from flight crew, pilots, and engineers. And in addition to all these lighter moments, more dramatic episodes, such as the infamous D.B. Cooper hijacking, are all recounted. And following on, in the same format from the previous book, there is a chapter that describes what a walk-around of the Boeing 727 would entail, and modelers, rejoice! There is a chapter that goes into extensive detail about how to model 3 different versions of this aircraft. This book was written with the full cooperation of Boeing, and as a result the tone remains complementary, but thankfully it avoids the blatantly hagiographic tone that you could see in the previous volume. Is this book the definitive work of the Boeing 727? It comes very close. Its greatest weakness lies in its lack of information, or rather its comparative lack of information about the planes used for international carriers, and the illustrations representing the variety of airlines such as DHL or ANSAT, for example, that utilized this very popular aircraft. But having said that, it cannot be denied that this book is detailed, is entertaining, and is impeccably researched. And it just comes in at 4 captain's hats. I do hope that Captain Dan continues with this series and produces a follow-on about the Boeing 757. And if he does, and if he's listening, please include a side profile of Hekla Aurora, the Iceland Air Boeing 757 that must surely be one of the most striking aircraft to ever grace the skies. He is hoping. And he's also hoping that you have found this review to be informative and helpful to some degree. Feel free to check out some of the other videos in my channel. I have reviews of books about ships, other planes, trains, and I've even dabbled a little into ancient history. So until the next time, enjoy and happy reading, everyone.